as we go forward, including your questions. So let me share about Nathan. Nathan and his wife are originally from Decatur, Georgia. Great area. I kind of live there. Nathan, very close to the area. In Tucker is where I live. They have 7 children, only one girl, 2 daughter-in-laws, and 2 grandchildren. They have served in Hokkaido, Japan since 1992. Nathan enjoys outdoor activities and anything with tools, construction or mechanical, and serving others. He is energized when opportunities arise to gather with positive, strategic green light thinking folks to brainstorm about impossible situations that need solutions or towards more efficient methods, especially in relation to ministry in Japan. Nathan is a graduate of Welsh College, earned a BS in Biblical Studies, BS in Music, and a minor in Cross Cultural Missions. Nathan and his family have been ministering in Japan for 28 years. Wow. With I Am Inc., International Missions Inc., as a church planter. He also serves as the pastor of Abashiri Christ Church and Fukin Baptist Senkyudan. He serves as also the president of GEMA, Japan Evangelical Mission Association, which is gemma.org. And GEMA's membership has grown actually over the last decade to just over 1,000 Protestant missionaries. Our membership consists of over 46 member mission organizations, many individuals and tent makers, and a number of parachurch organizations as endorsed ministries. Wow, Nathan, great. And again, we're excited to have you. So let me open us in prayer, and then I'm going to let Nathan share and just bless us with his time. And again, just be praying for him. I'm so glad, Nathan, you were sharing about your family. Glad everything's okay there. So let me open us in prayer here and let you share. Okay, let's pray. Chichinanu Kami Sama, we thank you so much just for this day, Lord, this first day of EC20 Beyond, and this workshop now with Nathan. Father, you just had a calling on his life and his family, and we just thank you for his time and his willingness to put this presentation together. Lord, and just pray that this time will be blessed and that we would learn together, and just as he shares his experience, his stories, Lord. And Father, we always can come to you ultimately to learn so much more about how to do ministry, how to connect with the Japanese, Lord. And he's been doing it with his family there. So we thank you, Lord, and just pray this will be a blessed time. Pray this and commit this time into your hands. In Jesus' name, amen. All right, Nathan, it's your show.
All right. Well, thank you. The longer I'm in this, the more questions I have. But, questions lead to finding solutions. And so I hope we'll put our thinking caps on a little bit today and have as much interaction as is possible in this forum. And just to the administrators, I'm not totally sure. I'm still on a learning curve, who can speak or whatever, but I'm certainly happy to be interrupted. And if I don't like what you have to say, I'll mute you and go on. So happy to have everybody in here, and it's one of those things where your excitement builds for an odd reason. It seems like there have been so many strikes against this workshop. Part of it is my own learning curve, and then some time misunderstandings. And then in the crunch of the moment, yesterday we had a long family day. My daughter-in-law turned her car over on the icy highway, so we said everybody's fine, nobody's hurt, but glad to get everybody safe and sound and back in their beds by 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning. So here we are. It's one of those times when you think, wow, if Satan is working so hard to put up such a fuss, then there could be some really cool things come out of this. So I hope and trust that through our time here today, and perhaps through some of your sharing, and by sharing our ideas and successes and failures, that through those, we can really enhance the front lines of ministry. In particular, as we discuss the topic at hand and something that we all share as a common burden, and that's reaching Japanese people for Christ. So, just a couple of words of instruction here. What I'd like to do, and anytime facilitators jump in and tell me, no, you can't do that or whatever, I'm going to try to mostly share a PowerPoint file that will be made available to you. It may already be in the chat session now. I think our administrator could speak into that, trying to make that available for you, if you want to put that up and follow along or have it later to flip back through or whatever. But 30 something slides, and in 3 or 4 different spots, I've tried to pause to have any discussion or questions. So I think they've set up a question page for you to send your questions to, or if you want to put them in the chat or whatever. When we make that pause, if you're allowed by the administrators, then jump in and ask the question orally or whatever. But take maybe 2 to 3, 4 minutes and see if that section has anything in particular that's just burning in your soul. You'll have to forgive me. It's been a long time since I've lived in Georgia, but I still got that Southern drawl and Southern culture in there. So you may hear some expressions that you haven't heard in a long time, or you may even need an interpreter for. Maybe Matt can help us out with that since he's in Atlanta now.
That's right.
All right. Well, let's jump in, and I'm gonna see if I can share my screen here. Just a second here. All right. Working together with the Japanese church. If for some reason I go offline or something happens, somebody give me a heads up, because this is all I can see here. The Japanese is in parentheses because that's our topic in particular, but a lot of this I think you'll find is applicable across the board, but there are definitely some sections in here that are very cultural specific in relation to Japan. So that's kind of why I put that in parentheses. In working together, and I'm going to just stay in the context of working in Japan as if there are no other cultures here. That is primarily my experience, and bringing with the cultural baggage that I bring. We've come up with a very interesting mix in our home of a third culture and maybe fourth and fifth and sixth, who knows. But as you come together to work, whether it's a team setting or a partnership setting, even a marriage, a marriage at best is a clash of cultures. So there's so much potential here. It could be a clash of cultures, do the LR switch there. It could be a crash of cultures, or it could be a beautiful corroboration of cultures. So in that, we kind of want to break that down and look at those strengths and dangers and weaknesses and potential building blocks. In cooperating, whether it's a team or a partnership or whatever, the relationship, but any relationship really, but your relationship with the Japanese church, if you would think of it like a bank account, and we all know if you don't regularly add to it, there's nothing to draw from when it's really, really important and when you need it the most. And if you don't keep a check on it, for those of you who do American banking, it's not just a matter of, oh, there wasn't any money in there. You can hear the numbers rack up, ka-ching, ka-ching, ka-ching. Everybody wants a piece of that fee, for whether it's the bank or the person you're sending the check to, and it gets expensive fast. And it's really no different in these relationships and working with the national church. And so, that's just a word of caution and a little preempt there. But these currencies are commodities. I like it's an older bank sometimes, it's savings and loan and trusts. And I thought about that, and that really rings true in so many ways. You're trusting someone with your money, but in relationships, trust is huge. And so, what are these currencies and commodities? What kind of deposits do you need to be making into that relationship? As we look at the factors there, some of them are kind of like, well, yeah, duh, that's kind of a no-brainer. Cultural differences. There are going to be some things that are big and present and that are always there. And just like any relationship, there are going to be the variables that may vary day to day or minute by minute in a meeting setting or season by season. I don't know what your experience is, but we found that ministry for us, we don't really look at it in days and weekdays and weekends, but it runs more in seasons. There will be an extremely busy season that will test the best of relationships. But then it's important to intentionally pull back and use those times when it's not so busy to strengthen those partnerships and teams and relationships and things. So some of the other things, philosophies of ministry. Now, this is something that it's duly noted. Just make a mental note to yourself. I am going to have a different philosophy of ministry from that person or those persons that I work with. Now, to what degree, and what do we do about that to take those different philosophies and blend them into that corroboration of cultures? And I've just kind of left a blank there. I've only left one, but there probably should be several as to what other types of important factors do we need to think about in depositing into these relationships. Some of this will, I think, make more sense as we unfold and unpack. But in particular, let's just talk about some of these currencies cooperation. I cannot stress enough the word time. I know that's a four-letter word, and maybe some of us are not supposed to use those, at least down in the South. But there's just no substitute for time. And looking at it from different angles, I want to pause here, take a little time, so to speak, and pause here and look at these three or more things. Speaking of philosophies of ministry, I realize this is mine, and I don't make apologies for it, and I reserve the right to change it if I change my mind about it. But right now, it's my philosophy of ministry here in Japan. It takes time, and it takes time in one place. Depending on your model of ministry or the type of ministry, then certainly you'll have to figure those variables in. But if you just kind of skip through, and if you're looking at, I'm going to use the word traditional as much as that can be controversial. But if you're looking at planting churches and reproducing churches, then for a number of reasons, you're going to need some continuity. And I think if you'll have that in mind as you go in, that is an important factor. I've seen many different sides of this, and once again, for different strategies, there are those that are laid out to where it's built on short-term type skip and hop and test the waters and looking for those persons of peace and things like that. But when you really put down roots, if you're going to be involved in that and have significant influence, then it takes time, and you need to be willing to commit to that. In the end, if you aren't careful, you can almost do more damage um, by pulling out too soon and losing that trust as a representative of the church and many things. So the other another one, and time is routine time, regular logging time with those that you're working with, and it builds trust. Some of these statements we're actually going to build on, and they're building blocks for some of what we're going to discuss in a little bit late in a little bit. But to put those routine times in, and then time to let's just take a look at this here. Your relationship with the national church is, did we already do that? Hang on just a minute, let me back up. And we did. I guess, no. Let me just read it just to be sure. My apologies. It's like a bank account. You have to invest. You make regular deposits in order to make withdrawals. The currency is complicated by the exchange rates of cultural differences, emotions, opinions, and philosophies of ministry. In those regular meeting times, those periodic meeting times, then it's not all about business. That is important. But let me start at the bottom and work backwards to really love on and encourage one another. If it's a family setting, or if anybody in there, has those kids, that's one of the easiest and most non-threatening way to say, look, we really appreciate you, and we value you. But to find their love language, that's a whole nother discussion. But it really works in ministry too. If you can have some discussions up front and just kind of get to know that person, kind of like icebreakers, but questions like, in the last 10 years of ministry, what are 2 or 3 things that you've experienced, maybe that someone has done for you, or things that have happened that have been extremely encouraging, or where somebody has really reached out and it just made an impression on you. It's a natural, non-threatening question, but you need to be taking mental notes or maybe physical notes and say, oh, well, through this I can learn, these are ways that I can invest in this person. These are ways that I can encourage. This is the way that they receive encouragement that really communicates to them. And you can be intentional, use that, put it in your toolbox in that relationship, and use that regularly to build that equity in that account. But let's go back up to the top here. Time to work. That's going to be important. I think for those of you who are very familiar, even in a little bit, with the Japanese culture, routine and just set methods, they're building blocks. They're important. Sometimes they're annoying. Sometimes they can be counterproductive, even by the Japanese brothers and sisters' own admission. But they are important, and we need to realize that, recognize that. And in the grand scheme of things, we are lifelong guests here. As much as we will be pulled in and have the high honor of being considered a nakama, or sort of an inside person, we do bring that perspective, and we can't change this. So we need to keep that in mind, and to honor and to plug into those cultural norms that we need to build on to use as building blocks. So, try to honor those at times, and even help set those up, and it lets them know, listen, this is important, and use those times to discuss work matters and ministry matters. But one thing that we can, I think, bring that's refreshing and educational, as it's probably not done, it's not so much the norm here in 100% Japanese setting, but I think it's healthy. I think it's modeled in scripture, is to have some designated times to play together. Plan a retreat, or have some regular play days. Where when I say play days, that's going to depend on who you are and who that person is and what they like. Find out what they like to do and meet them on their turf. For me, I like to play park golf. If you don't know what that is, it's like a dehydrated regular golf course played on a putt, well, with real golf rules. And anyway, it's great. It's cheap. It's outside. It's fun. It's fellowship. I like to ride, a motorcycle. So, one of the pastors I work with, he does too. So, we may go riding or something, or the onsen, whatever it is, fill in the blank. But this may be something that you have to model, and not in a lecture setting, but say, hey, listen, it's this is important too. And so let's put some time in here. And certainly to pray together, to have those corporate times of prayer. But even smaller groups, one-on-one or two or three, to do it private. But another thing I've found that's encouraging in giving and receiving is to let somebody know and just say, listen, in particular, here's what I prayed about for you today, or here's what I'm praying about for you, or, the Lord's put you on my heart. And is there something in particular that I can be praying with you about now? So those are really, really important tools and currencies that you can be adding there. And I'm not trying to insult your intelligence. I mean, these are no brainers, but if your mind works like I do, those are some of the things that I need to hear the most. One of my favorite lines and one of my favorite hymns is, I love to tell the story for those who know it best, seem hungering and thirsting to hear it like the rest. And it's just such a marvelous story with so many facets. I think this is just one of them. And to have those dream sessions, back to our list here, and to strategize. If we don't do this, I promise you, you will get stuck in a rut. That is not a fun place to be. Bad things happen in too long of a rut. So for no other reason, just have some creative thinking sessions and dream those dreams together and strategize and do some creative thinking together. All right, if I can, I want to pause here to be sure that we don't have any questions or comments. I don't see any. If I'm looking in the right place, I don't see them posted on the comment page. And let me check the chat thing, or if somebody else has eyes on it, then they can.
Nobody's written in there yet.
Okay.
Does anyone have any questions though for Nathan at this point? You can raise your hand and Tommy can call on you.
Yeah, Kelly had a question. So Kelly, I guess we'll just ask now. You want to go ahead and ask your question?
Yeah, thanks, Tommy. Hi, this is Kelly. So what I found is that many Japanese people who I actually know and have some degree of actual relationship with, they're not strangers, they're not first time meeting, they're not, brand new folks that I've just met. I'll ask them, like you suggested, for prayer requests, and they won't answer me. It's not in anything rude or mean. They just always say nope, 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 nope. And I just wondered if you have any suggestions or even insights into why that happens to me really on a regular basis. Maybe it's just me.
Yeah. No, I don't think it's you. I think it's on a broader scale. The culture here is not encouraging of anyone letting people into that inner circle. If I could offer one suggestion, don't quit asking. And, when you get a chance to say, listen, I know I ask you this a lot, but let me tell you why I ask you. It's not just, hey, fill out a form here. I'm genuinely interested and I really want to come alongside of you. And there will be times when I need you to come alongside of me and I want to be able to share my heart with you too, especially if it's in a, female to female or male to male context like that.
Can I add something to that?
Yes, please.
My experience, I think part of it is just listening to what the other person is saying, because in the course of conversation, they'll share with you what they're doing, or they'll share with you some of their struggles they're having. So just ask them whether it's okay for you to be praying for them about those things that they're already sharing with you anyway. And I think as we start praying about those things and asking, oh, so by the way, how did that event, how did the doctor appointment go the other day or something like that? Or how did your work situation you were dealing with go? I was praying about it with you. Then they'll begin to trust you more. I think they'll open up more things as you go along.
It's excellent. Absolutely. Roberta, and then Christian, and then we'll move on. Yep.
You're
Yeah, I think
muted.
you're muted.
How do you get Christians, like you said, they like to stay, they're not used to being asked about the inner heart stuff, but when you talk about those dream, what was the word you said, dream sessions, what did you
Yeah.
call it?
That strategy, and we'll get into that in a little bit. That's coming up.
I've found that my non-Christian friends, I don't know if it's because I'm a Christian or something, they just love sharing their dreams with me, but my Christian friends just get very protective of everything. It's like, but the non-Christian people that I know, they're like telling me, yeah, I'm going to marry my girlfriend, I'm going to start my business, and it's kind of surprising to me, because I would think that Christians would be the ones wanting to share their dreams, but I'm finding the non-Christians feel freer to share, and even ministry people just dream sessions would be like, just sharing the dreams would be so cool. But I don't know any missionaries that actually gather to share what their dreams are for ministry.
Mm-hmm. I think you've hit on something that has so much potential there, to say, listen, God really wants us to succeed. God wants us to live a joyful life. I think there's a false, non-verbal taught philosophy that Christians aren't supposed to have fun. We're supposed to be so humble that our lives are miserable, or we're not spiritual. And I think one of my goals here, I feel like, before I can effectively communicate the gospel, is I have to ruin the image of the Christian that they have in their mind.
Yeah.
And so, I think that's part of it. Christian, sorry, I'm just reading the first name I see on the scene. If that's not your name, I'm sorry.
No, that's fine. So I have a friend. Well, okay. I'm trying to figure out how to say this without giving you a story of context. But long story short, I met a pastor when I was in Tokyo 2 years ago, and I really felt connected with her, and I'll be seeing her again when I go back to Japan. And I'll be working with her church. And so, and I'm going, and I also stayed with some missionaries in Tokyo. So my idea was like, oh, well, let me just reach out to the pastor to let her know she's not alone, and like I do want to help support her and everything. But then the missionaries were encouraging me not to contact her too much, because pastors are so tired, because they're basically on clock all the time, and that they don't really have privacy or space. And so the missionaries were really encouraging me to just not really respond too much or message her too much on Facebook, to respect her space. So how do you balance something like that, especially when you're encouraging play dates and such?
Yeah, I think that's a good point, and I appreciate your sensitivity to that. Just in general, I do work with some busy people, and so sometimes if I send them a note, I just want to send an encouraging note to say, listen, here's what I'm thinking. Or in this case, in the event that you would like to go do whatever sometime, whatever, then please give me, let me know, or something like that. But at the end of that, and a lot of times, if it's somebody in their family that's died, or, I know they're in a busy or stressful season, I'll just put a little note, say, listen, I'm not looking for a response. Please don't feel the need to even respond to this email. Just want to let you know, I'm here, available, if you want to, if you have time, or something like that. So that's a great point. All right, we're going to jump back in here. I apologize. I'm sure I'm going to be overlooking some hands and waves, but put those questions in, and we'll try to get those at the end so we don't overlook anybody. But I do want to try to push forward here. Back to sharing the screen here, right? Okay. All right, we may breeze through some of this a little faster than I had hoped, but hey, it's okay. All right, let's talk about the key commodity of trust. It's huge here. In a working relationship in Japan in particular, without trust, and the word in there is shindai kanke. Shindai kanke. Without trust, you have nothing. I've heard that phrase. If I've heard it once, I've heard it 1,000 times. No matter what your qualifications or the letters on the end of your name might be, uh, if you don't have that that trust relationship, that shinai kanke, then you really don't have anything. So you need to be protective of that. You need to be proactive in building trust. In Japan, many times it's not about who you are, but who do you know, or who do they know that trusts you or that recommends you. And I've seen this a number of times. And so even when I introduce myself to someone for the first time, I know better now than to say, hey, this is me. This is who I am. This is who I represent. This is what I'd like to do. This is what I'd like to talk to you about. Then I'll come in and say, listen, this is me, and I was talking with and cite someone that they know and that they trust, or that they would know about, and they suggested that maybe I come talk to you, and I was wondering if that would be okay. So that anything non-direct like that, where you can angle it off, I found to be a good tool. Some more keys to building trust. We've already talked about time and talk a lot, but listen more. When I say talk, I'm thinking of the Japanese word hanashiao, which means to discuss. It doesn't mean to just direct and talk at. It means have discussion, and a lot of that is certainly listening as well. To what do you talk about? Well, let me just kind of toss some things out to maybe maybe these aren't great ideas, but maybe there'll be a catalyst in getting your mind going, and you can make some creative notes. No matter if it's church planting or team building or whatever, no one set of rules or workshop or whatever is going to rubber stamp fit what you're doing. So, I really trust that maybe some things that are said or done here today will just serve as a catalyst, so you can build your own set of tools that are going to work in your particular cultural setting. In crisis management training that I was in, I think I could sum up the whole course with this. The best way to manage a crisis, the very best way, is to, as best as possible, prevent it to begin with. And so in relationships, that's just huge. So what do you talk about? Here's some good starters. Let's talk about a clear understanding of a working relationship. Who answers to who. Now, when I say let's talk about it, doesn't mean you go in and you put down your agenda and say these are the things we need to talk about. You come in and say, listen, I was wondering if we could talk about things like this. These are some questions I have. Maybe you could help me and help us dialogue through here, because I want a good understanding of what you're expecting of me. Use a lot of I and me kind of approaches. It's really helpful here. So a clear understanding of work and relationship. What's the protocol? Who do I answer to? Lines of responsibility. And this is a good chance to say, listen, I'm trying to understand the dynamic. The better I understand the dynamic of our relationship and our church work or whatever ministry you're in right there, it's going to be helpful for me. So if I answer to so and so and so, and if you don't mind my asking, I'm kind of studying this model here. Who do you answer to? Now you have to be very careful how you answer that, but everybody needs some accountability, and that would be really a dangerous situation. Well, I don't answer to anybody. I'm it. That might be worth a discussion. Leadership of what? Of Sunday school, or of worship, of outreach, of discipleship. Who leads what? It would be good. Maybe they haven't thought through that. Maybe they have. And if you don't ask those questions and come away with a clear understanding, then you'll make some mistakes that could have been easily prevented by just asking some of these questions. Now, your role in leadership and responsibility and things like that, I'm going to pull out of sort of an old school, maybe you've heard of the 4 P's of missionary church relationship. The pioneer stage, where you've got nothing. You're in charge. You're not in charge of anything because there's nobody. You're it. You're pioneer. So you kind of dig it out. And then you have parenting. You've got some church people there. You have some Christians, and you need to disciple them and parent them. So that's the pioneer and parenting. And then partnership. They're maturing. So you're in a partnership, and that relationship is going to look different. And then finally, you're a participant. So each one of those, as you can imagine, has a different leadership and protocol structure. And so those discussing those and talking those out is going to be helpful. Finances. This is you could go a lot of different ways, but I'll just throw some of these out. Who pays for what? If there's a church activity, or if you need some curriculum or whatever, you think this is great. There's this new hot item that I'm all excited about, and it's worked in a lot of different places, and we got to get this. Well, who's going to pay for it? What's the standard, or what are their ideas? And another thing, what about tithing? This may come up later here in the seminar. We'll just skip over it if it does. But what about your tithes to the church? That's a whole missiological discussion that you may want to have with the pastor. Listen, I believe in tithing. I believe I should be tithing. But, if I start tithing to the church and the church builds its budget around my tithes, and then, 4 years from now, if I'm not here, all of a sudden, I've hamstrung the church. So how do we get around that? Or, what do you suggest? Some of those, that's just good to talk through. And then working through conflict, because it will come. It's kind of like the 3 groups of people in life. There are 3 groups of people in life: those who are in the middle of a storm, those who are getting ready to go through a storm, or those who have just come out of it. That's it. That's it. We live in an imperfect and a fallen world. So conflict is no exception. Going back through this list, just kind of working through it real quick. We're going to go quickly for time's sake, and then you've got this to look back on. So clear understanding of working relationship. Let's agree on protocol. Who communicates with who and reports to whom about what. What's your job title, and what does it mean? That is really, really crucial and critical. It would be best for you to have these discussions before you actually call the moving company and move to the place where you think you're going to spend a long time in this partnership. I'm telling you. Don't ask me how I know, just believe me. What's everyone else's job title, and what does it mean? If you want everybody to understand what you're doing, by the same token, you need to have a clear understanding. You can't over communicate in areas like this. What and when is work? You may feel like you're doing the work of a missionary or church work that day or whatever, but somebody else may look at it and say, what, is he not working today? Maybe you're at the gym playing with some young people or whatever. So, what is work? Those are important things to have a mutual understanding about. Lines of responsibility of your duties and your functions. What am I expected to do? Now, we can't pause for time's sake here, but pause a long time here. I'm telling you, this can be very divisive. It can be, it can break it all down. What am I allowed to do in ministry? What am I not allowed to do? How much decision making? You'll use a Japanese word, and I just like it. It's how much play, how much give and take do I have? How much liberty do I have? How much yo-you do I have? And, calling the shots on the scene. And then expectations of my role in church government and meetings. But let me go back to the ones with the asterisks and just give you a few live examples. If you come, it depends on what your credentials are. At Philosophies of Ministry, it kind of goes back to that too. I'm not drawing any biases or discriminations here. I'm just telling you, in our world, then the conversation should take place ahead of time. What does it mean? Are there responsibilities that differ, whether you're a man or a woman? Whether you have the credentials of ordination on your name or not? Whether you're a missionary or whether you're a pastor? Some of those potential yeses and nos that were clear in your mind and are clear in their mind, but you have a clearly different idea of what those are, of the ordinances. What about communion? And in our case, feet washing. That's another discussion. And performing a marriage ceremony or a wedding ceremony. If you're thinking, hey, there's no big deal, somebody asks you, you go do that, and the pastor says, hey, what are you doing? You're not allowed to do that. So those are some really good things to talk through. What are you expected to do? What are you allowed to do? And is there anything you're not allowed to do? Leadership of who leads what. And this will depend on many things. We've talked about this some of these, but some other points, your level of Japanese, that's going to play into it. Good, bad, or ugly. Don't take offense at it. That's just part of it. Use it as a instigator to, always keep learning. Your experience in ministry, your age. I didn't put this in here, but if you're older and have more experience in ministry than say a pastor you're working with, then that's going to change the dynamics, and you may have to be more intentional. It may work to your advantage or disadvantage. So talk through those things. Finances, we talked about that a little bit before, so I'm going to skip over that. We pretty much covered what's on that screen. And I think we should skip over this pause. So if you have a question, can you send it to that doc site or put it in the notes, and we'll push those off to the end here. I do want to I want to be sure and communicate this. Working through conflict. Our saying is an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. But in the metric context, it even weighs heavier. A gram of prevention is worth a kilogram of cure. I've never said it like that. We'll probably never say it like that, but it's worth making a note of. I want to pause here on this whole conflict thing a little bit. Some tools for discussion. And I say working through conflict, that really is your goal. Working through a conflict is a whole lot prettier than managing a conflict or avoiding a conflict. So how do you best handle difficult conversations? Now, I realize this is a topic that you could spend weeks and semesters on, and it really deserves its own workshop. But it's very applicable to here, and I think I can toss out some practical tools that will help in this setting. So let's run through those real quickly. Have a conversation about how do you best handle difficult conversations. So, you're sitting there, you're talking with your coworker or your team, and find out how each person handles difficult conversations. In particular, if you're the senior member, if you have people under you, say, listen, I know there's going to come a time when I probably need to talk to you about something, and maybe you want to talk to me about something. How do you best receive that information? Here's 3 examples. Are you the kind of person who just wants it straight? Just hit you up with it to, when I meet you, say, hey man, how you doing? Great to see you. Listen, you really made me mad the other day. We've got to talk. For some people, that's like, okay, hey, yeah, let's do that right now. And for others, they're done. That relationship is over. You just hit them upside the head with a baseball bat. Another example, direct contact, but sort of a heads up approach. You're still dealing with them directly. Maybe you send them an email, a little Oreo approach. Hey, appreciate what you're doing. There's the nice cookie, the cream on the inside I realized there was some tension the other day, and I'd really like for us to talk through that. But I'm looking forward to working through this. There's the other cookie on the bottom, or maybe a phone call where you kind of give them an idea of, hey, I need to talk to you about something. So can we work on doing that? And they're not hit up with it such a surprise. Sometimes if you surprise somebody, um, it doesn't end pretty. So it helps to know and to talk about ahead of time, how do you like to receive that information? Then if it doesn't go well, you can say, hey, listen, I'm really trying here. You remember a few months ago, we talked about how to best do this, and I want to work through this, and that's what I'm trying to do here. And then maybe indirect. So don't even mention the conflict. To say, listen, there's something that I'd like to talk with you about. That's I want to work through. When's a good time to talk about talking about it? Some people are just like that. And then third party. Now, I want to hit this hard. You need to know this. You really need to know this. Third party involvement. This one hit me upside the head, and I've just about come to terms with it almost 30 years later. Agree on what your team's interpretation of Matthew 18:15 through 17 and the verses beyond will be. I think that'll make sense here in the next few moments. You should also agree on this. Ignoring conflict or avoiding it is not an option. It's not an option, or you don't need to be working together. But also remember, timing, attitude, approach, and your heart in the matter is everything. So you be the bigger person there and be sure that you've got those right. Let's talk about third-party involvement. What are the rules of engagement? Well, what are you saying? What are you talking about? Third-party involvement, that's gossip, right? The scripture clearly says you go directly to that person. Well, that's what my Bible says. That's what, whether it's in Japanese or English or any other, Gengo or, the original. But the contextualized version of traditional conflict resolution in Japan in many areas is the default setting is third party because they don't want a confrontation. That's not their fault and character. That's the cultural norm. Now, whether it should be or not, that's another discussion. But you have to take people where they're at. And this is worth having a discussion with the people that you're going to be working with. There will be conflict. And are we going to do this? Or we're not? Let's drop some rules. I'll give you an example. The police are often called here. In America, you call the police on me, we're going to have some words. It's different. You call the police here and you've done me a favor sometime because you haven't come to my door and you haven't addressed me personally with something that's bothering you. The police is like, they're like a middleman, and it's taken me a long time to come to terms with that. And yeah, we've had police show up at our door on occasion. One time is a ball hit didn't do any damage. It hit the neighbor's car. One of the other neighbors said, hey, I saw the police over there and you know what was happening. And they said, don't worry about that neighbor. He calls police on everybody. So, but this is important here. So you need to decide, am I good with this? And in talking with the people you're working with, say, okay, if I am, then let's define what it is. And we're going to run through this. Is it allowed as an acceptable means of initial contact? Are you going to accept party C when party B has something against you? Party C comes to you. Is that going to really mess you up that they talk to them and they're coming to talk to you? Whereas, are you going to say, hey, listen, that person cares so much about me, then we're keeping our rules here, and this is an acceptable way. We agreed on this. If it's allowed, I would suggest you agree to one person per incident. It's not like you got three people and three of them are coming at you and okay, the default is this. And the same person, if that person comes to you, use that person to send an answer back, instead of flying back at the other person. What do you mean? Again, talk through this, decide what you're going to do ahead of time. And then when it's done and expect it to be able to work through, then do something together for the mediator. Take them out to coffee and say, listen, we sure appreciate you. We really do. So these are just some suggestions, and hopefully it'll give you some creative ideas to work out your own system. But realize that this is most often the established cultural norm here in general. All right, pushing through here. Tools for discussion, working through conflict. Remember, conflict can be healthy. It can be. So don't avoid it, but don't go looking for it either. Don't just say, hey, we need some health built in here. Let's have some conflict. I know some people like that. They're not fun to work with. Embrace it as a tool to grow closer and to build trust and respect. And then follow up well. Follow up well. If each party is determined to be the bigger person, it's going to end well. And listen, it can become such a powerful testimony. I've seen this. I've seen it both ways. I've seen it be a terrible testimony, and I've seen a church destroyed down to 0 people. But I've also seen it as a powerful testimony as to what the power of the gospel can be in our lives. But it takes everybody involved and committed to protecting the integrity of the process. That's why it's crucial that you talk about this and agree on it, and to be each other's protectors and brothers keepers and sisters keepers to begin with. After all, it was Jesus that said, by this, all people will know that you are my disciples if you have love for one another. I can't think of a better example of a way to prove that. Strategize together, a toolbox. Have some dedicated green light thinking sessions. Just real quick, what is that? That means no red lights, no yellow lights. You're not allowed to say, but we don't have the resources. We don't have the personnel. We don't have the money or whatever. That doesn't belong in that session. Set a timer from this time to this time is green light. And then bop somebody on the head if they pull out a yellow light or a red light. Use thought-provoking questions. And we're out of the green light session. These are just strategy tools here. Use thought-provoking questions. For example, if our group, if what we're doing here, if we just disappeared, if we weren't here then what would happen? Who would notice? Are we making a difference? Where do we want to be in 5 years, 10 years? Just the standard kind of stuff. But whatever it is, do it. And it keeps you fresh. It keeps you questioning yourself, which is healthy. Keeps you out of a rut. Tameshini, I love this. It's my favorite. I can't spend enough time talking about this. It's a safe place. It's a good compromise in working together with the Japanese culture and at least my culture, at least, my personal culture or American culture or whatever. Different cultures may take it different. But tameshini means let's try it. Tamesu is to try to test it. And so if you say, hey, here's something I want to try. I want to try a tameshi. Are you hearing me? Tameshini. You say it regularly, every meeting, all the time. And here's what it'll do. We'll get into that here in just a slide or two. But also offer to take the hit and give the credit. And I think that comes up again later. If not, ask me. Okay, tameshini. If you're just testing something from the get-go, hey, listen, we're not asking you to commit to this. It's just a test. Tameshini, let's do it. It doesn't overcommit resources or personnel. It allows everybody an out after a fixed period of time. So maybe you agree to try this for 3 months or 6 months or 8 sessions. At the end of that, nobody has abandoned anything if they decide, okay, this is not for me. Everybody has an honorable out. So you're not asking somebody to commit and then lose face by bailing ship. And it allows acceptable failure. Okay, well, we tried that and it didn't work. It was just a test. So nobody loses faith. It's huge here. It allows it to stop for any number of reasons. It just didn't work. We don't have the staff. We don't have the resources. Oh, we found out this is going to be, the situation changed. It was an Olympic thing. The Olympics are gone. The Olympics didn't happen. Well, we didn't fail. We were going to try it for a while and it didn't. It's a strategic stop. Maybe you want to use it as sort of a bait or whatever to try it. It works out great, but don't continue it. So it's still exciting. So in a few months later, you can do it again. Any number of things. The blank there, fill in your own blank. Strategizing together tools, responsibility. Perhaps one of your greatest gifts to your team as a foreigner coming in. Here's some things that you can say, listen, we're going to try this, or if it's all right with you, I'd love to try this. If it fails, blame it on me. Nobody really expects me to do much here anyway. So no skin off my nose, pardon this other expression. Be willing to say, listen, if it falls on its face, put my name on it. I'm okay with that. I don't mind. But remember, Japanese leaders, whether it's a church or business context or whatever, they cannot afford repeated failure. It's just not, they can't stay where they're at. And that's just not a part of the culture. So don't fight it, just contextualize it. And if it succeeds, give the credit to whoever it is that you're working with, even if it was your idea, right? If you want credit, you're in the wrong profession. If you don't care who gets the credit, then you gain credibility and you gain that trust. And there's more opportunity to speak into the things. So that's one of your greatest gifts, perhaps, to your team. I accidentally repeated some of that in that slide, so we're going to skip over that. The meeting culture, this is really good. Get some help. And just Japanese meetings in general. It's a huge cultural study, and it's worth the time and effort to invest in that. Get some help. Talk about it. Say, listen, tell me what I need to know before I walk into that room. Where do I need to sit? Where do I need not to sit? Do I need to speak at all? That kind of thing. Have the patience to be silent until asked. Okay. Japan is mostly a consensus culture. It creates a different meeting culture. It's unlike the individualistic, okay, let's pop it out there. Let's throw out the points. Everybody make up their mind. Majority rules. We're going to vote on it and go on. That's how we are. No, it's just not how it works in general here. So be patient. It's more of a consensus, which means probably you will be asked. So wait patiently. If you blow it by talking too much, you won't be asked and you won't have any credibility. Expect a slower process. Sometimes it's painstakingly slow, but it's worth it. I promise you. I could give you some examples, but I won't. Don't offer your opinion first. Ask your national partner for advice. And when asked for your own advice, very respectfully, but when you're asked, very confidently, give it. Sit there and take notes. Document it. This is why I think that, and I think you'll be pleased at how that's received. Practical suggestions: give your opinion as a question. This is what I, definitely this is the way I ought to do. Well, as opposed to that, here's kind of what I was thinking. What if, and what do you think? So speak so it raises questions and provokes thought. So it facilitates creative thinking instead of starting with the answers. This is why I'm telling you it's going to work. No, don't do that. Okay, here's what I was thinking. Here's what I was wondering. And, do you think we might see some success like this? What do you think? Going back to what I said earlier about who you know or whatever, same thing with material. If you can, cite, quote, or reference examples when you can, especially when it comes to successes. Finally, help each other. And this is huge. I wish I could have spent a whole time on this. Help each other to find their gifting. Know what yours is going in, but have this discussion for days if you want. And as best as possible, facilitate each to work within that. It leads to fulfilling ministry. It leads to terribly frustrating ministry and burnout and disaster. And it really represents the body of Christ at its finest. How many times in Scripture does it say God has gifted so-and-so with this talent and that talent, and we're the body of Christ? Some people need to be the heart. Some people need to be the head. Some people need to be the armpit. Some people need to be the sole of the feet. Some people need to be the hands. But find out what those are and say, what do you do? What is life-giving? What kind of ministry do you thrive on? Find that out from others. Share that about you. And see if you can work together. It may take some restructuring, but everybody work within their gifting. Yeah, there's going to be times when you've got to do somebody else's stuff, but try to make that temporary and talk through that and work through that and have fun. Model joy. I think I said this earlier to somebody that I think it's my opinion that one of the greatest inhibitors to the growth of the church in Japan is the church itself. And sometimes we've got to ruin that image of what they're in their mind, what a Christian is or is supposed to be, or what a church is, that, Sumaranai Kurai image. What about a bright and joyful image? I'm having the time of my life here. It's just not fair that I get to have a job to do something I love to do and get paid for it and be able to eat from it. And when I go to bed at night, I'm not getting rich off of it, but wow, my heart's overflowing, that kind of thing. 最後にお疲れ様でした. So I'm going to stop there. And sorry to talk so fast. I hope you were able to listen fast. I'll try to listen to you and follow my administrator's leadership from here on out.
Thank you, Nathan. And before we get into the last Q&A section, I just want to remind you guys, please, 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 in the chat, the same link for the survey that you did for the last workshop, if you were there. Before you leave, take a few minutes, please fill out this workshop and give us your feedback. We will be reminding you of this every single workshop session, so get used to it. And we're not going to stop reminding you. And that's all. So if anyone has questions, go ahead. We are going to be here till about 10:15, and then we're going to have to sign off to force you guys to get some rest. But yes, does anyone
Well,
have any questions for Nathan?
That's great, because I've got 3:05 here. Man, that's like 7 hours for me. So we got 7 hours of time to go. Is that maybe what you were talking about there? I will say this: I'm a lifer here, as far as having a heart for my Japanese brothers and sisters, no matter where I'm at in the world. So I think maybe my email's out there. If we run out of time today, or if two or three of us want to pick this conversation up later, I'd always welcome a good creative think tank. So I'll be quiet here.
Questions?
Can I just ask you to repeat one thing that you said? I didn't hear it quite clearly. It was on that slide that talked about having fun and like praying and whatnot, but it was like a conversation starter, and I didn't quite catch it. It had the word encouragement in it. At that.
Okay. Let me just take this chance to ask an administrator where the PowerPoint file is and how do they get it if they want it, because it's available to you all if you want it. It's not perfect.
It was pasted in the chat. So if you scroll up, guys, you should be able to find that PowerPoint document and download it.
Yeah, it's in there.
Okay. Does that help you, Tim?
It was on slide 7.
Okay.
Time
Let
to
me. Great. ... Okay. Let's see. I started out at the bottom of that. Love and
That's
encourage
right.
one another.
That's right. Right
And,
after you said that, you mentioned a conversation starter. It sounded really good, but I didn't quite catch it.
Oh yeah, I think I know what you're talking about.
Yeah.
If you ask them, say, listen, in the last, you come up with a time period, in the last 5 years, 10 years, or in your ministry, in your life, or whatever, what are 2 or 3 things, or 4 or 5 things, or what's one thing, whatever, that someone has done for you that just really blessed your heart, that really encouraged you along the way, that has stuck with you. I'd love to hear about that. Non-threatening conversations where they don't even know what you're trying to get at can give you some great tools to encourage them in the future. Yeah. Thank you. Mm-hmm.
I have a question. I've had friends who are in the mission field, usually with parachurch organizations, talk about when they're ministering to Japanese nationals, and then the Japanese national start to get become a believer or be seriously interested in Christianity and start to get plugged into a Japanese church. The church will then discourage them from continuing the relationship with the missionary. The very of like, you're a part of our church community now, you don't need to be a part of that relationship anymore. Do you have any thoughts on that, or advice on how to avoid that kind of tension, or maybe what's the mindset going on there? That any form of clarification there would be helpful.
The only thing that comes to my mind is for that new believer to say, listen, the longer you're a part of a church, it's just like a family. All families are dysfunctional. It depends on what the dysfunction is and to what extent. And you're going to bring some dysfunctions to that too. So when you have times of discouragement, whether it's, and use that as an example, name it specifically, name 2 or 3 things so it doesn't look like you're throwing rocks. Don't let that discourage you. You know, I think people's hearts are genuinely, they want to see you grow. But the other side of it is, if you just find yourself in a toxic environment, don't stay there. You know, I'll help you find it. You don't want to be a facilitator of church dissension. But I mean, it was the Christians of the day that crucified Jesus. You know, I can't think of a more toxic environment than that. And we're really good at doing that. So, you know, I think the best case scenario to try to prevent some of those crises, if you can ask around about that church before you recommend it to them. And if you know, if at each one, if that's sort of a green light, ask to talk to the pastor first, and even just shoot straight with him and say, listen, him or her, you know, say, I've heard of this, and I really don't want this. I want to bless your church. I want to bless this new believer. And how can we work together, you know, to ensure the success that not of this believer, but they're going to, you know, they're going to grow and they're going to multiply. And I think you may have to pick him up off the floor after that.
Yeah, I know that some of the JCFN folks, you know, when they've gotten involved in a church, they sometimes they've had pastors that are like, well, you know, we don't know about parachurch stuff, and you know, it's like in Japan, it's really important to be respectful of your local pastor and not speak badly of him and to follow his authority, and so it's hard for the returnee.
Let me just follow that with something there's a huge risk when I even open my mouth here. So please don't misunderstand and do not misquote me. I have the utmost respect for our Japanese pastors and churches here, and they have problems just like I do. But in the context, I'm not talking about the general context of ministry in Japan, in the context of returning Japanese, their first exposure of the gospel was likely on foreign soil with a foreigner. Their concept of Christian culture, that's their baseline. So if you throw them into the icy waters of a traditional Japanese church setting, I'm not saying it's bad. That's not a criticism. I'm just saying it's vastly different. It's liable to blow up, and we're liable to lose that one. So I have a suggestion, and I'm not putting one over the other. I'm just a timeline, a progression. You know, ultimately, we want those Japanese people back in Japan, in a Japanese church, being facilitators of the growth of Japanese church. But to get there, one maybe alternate and maybe a better step, use the GEMA network. You know, we have 1,000+ missionaries. They're foreigners. You know, for that new believer coming back, that's comfort food. You know, let's talk about food. Maybe they first learned about barbecue potato chips in America. When they get back, they're going to want barbecue potato chips. If somebody goes and buys them a bag of barbecue chips, they're going to be like, oh, this was great. It just puts me back there. Just those soft steps. And talk to that missionary and say, listen, will you help bridge the gap? They may not go to their church, but maybe they're willing to meet with them regularly, and that gives them a safety net. It gives them some concrete steps to get to where we want to eventually, you know, see them go. So that would be a suggestion that I've had with others.
Thank you so much.
Any other last questions before we wrap up?
When are you going to write your book?
I've got more questions than answers, Roberta.
I see Tim Wang with a question.
Yeah, I don't know if we have enough time to talk about this one, but in my ministry context in Toronto, like what I want to do is to create a directory to link people interested in reaching out to the Japanese within this city with various churches that already have a platform. So it's like a type of collaborative type work with various churches. The Japanese churches in this city may no longer actually just reach to the Japanese, and may in fact reach to their communities. Whereas some other churches may begin to develop ministries to Japanese people. So I guess the question is, how does partnerships with multiple churches, with multiple denominations, with multiple cultures work? Yeah.
Maybe some of you know what's out there already, some models. I think this is a great place to start, this RJC. It's not just about returning Japanese, but it's reaching Japanese in these cities. A couple of things I've seen and used. I stumbled onto a website that lists, it's not very well organized, but there is a list to some degree of churches in America that are either Japanese or reaching Japanese. I just kind of Googled it, and I don't even know. I'd have to Google it to try to find it again. And then, maybe if there's any particular, if you want to target students or something like that, I know there's some good organizations that maybe you could say, hey, listen, you may not realize it, but there's a whole lot of Japanese students here. What can we do to get you to consider coming to look at our city? Another thing would be to say, hey, can we have a monthly prayer meeting so we can pray for the Japanese people in our city? That would be a non-threatening way to pull people together, whether they're a Japanese church or ministering to Japanese. Prayer is something we can unite on, even if our differences are vast. And in that, there's a good fishing pond for maybe the next step. I think Aaron and then Samuel. Aaron Lehman, did you have a question?
No, I was just agreeing with you.
Okay. Sorry. Samuel? Kim? I saw a hand. I didn't know if that was an agreement or a... Okay.
You're good. Cool. Well, I think that's about it. We're at time.
Thanks, guys. It's been a pleasure. And like I said, I'm to more Japanese folks can hear the gospel. So if I can help you any way, do that, or if I can be of a help, I urge you. It's a
You break it. Yeah, thank you, Nathan. All right,
we may have
everybody.
lost Nathan at the very last 30 seconds. As he's...
Wow.
Okay.
Praise God. He was in there this long. Woo.
Well, thank you guys. Thank you for being here. Thank you. You made it through your
Sorry,
first
I lost you
day. And Nathan,
Good.
you're back. Do you have any last words for us as we sign
Yeah,
off?
that last two sentences there. You go to gemma.org, check it out. If you want to join, fine. I'm not trying to sell you a bag of goods. I think it's great. I believe in it. It's a great resource. If nothing else, it's a network to put these things out so we can ongoing dialogue and get some of those questions and answers. Thank you guys so much. You've been very gracious. I really appreciate it.
Thank you
for your service.
Yeah, it's wonderful. Thanks, everybody. We will see you tomorrow.
Thank
Have
you.
a good
Good night.
rest and rest of your evenings.